Everyone, I'm Chris Dobbin, and I'm happy to see you again on our live stream, Amplify Your Brand, the series where we do the ultimate on powerful brand building in today's digital age. Along with my friend and fellow colleague and branding expert, Simao, on the screen there, we're here to share the expertise and help you take your brand to the next level. So whether you're an entrepreneur, small business owner, a marketing professional, or someone's tinkering around with a personal brand, this is a live stream packed with practical insights and strategies that will help you amplify your brand and stand out in that digital landscape. So please get ready, take some notes, take what we talk about today and put it into action, because by the end of this live stream, you should have a clearer roadmap on how to build a brand that truly resonates with your target audience. So thank you for joining us again, and let's find another way to amplify your brand. And we are revisiting a topic we did last year called brand evolution, and it's recognizing the signs that you need a rebrand. A rebrand is a powerful tool to refresh your image, connect with your target audience, and stay relevant in a constantly evolving market. Also, something you don't take lightly. It's not like you just jump in every day and do this. This is not a daily event. This is something you're doing strategically, and you're doing it because and we're going to go through a list of things that could cause you to want to revisit that. But topic close to your heart, because we've done a few of these types of projects. What's your thoughts on where we're going today with rebranding?
There has to be a rhyme behind the reason. And like you said, a rebrand is not an everyday operation because one, it entails many costs. Yeah. And two, it may be a rebirth tool as well as a suicide tool. So needs to be used with responsibility. And today we're going to cover cases where brands can, should, or shouldn't, and what happened from the ones that we know that did.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned cost, but sometimes you are forced, and we're going to go through one of those examples in the list today, but there are times when you just have to do it. And that cost you have to do it can be a small one, or it can be a big one, just depends on the size of your business and the amount of touch points you have and all those kind of things. So it's a scale of economy when it comes to these things.
Yes.
But there are another topic which we will revisit later in the year as well, which is refreshing rather than a rebrand.
Refreshing, restyling, revamping.
Yes. So let's get right into it, and let's start the presentation of today. So before we do, though, I'd like to just quickly remind everyone that whatever we talk about today is part of the P8 branding program that we have in place that encompasses the 8 critical sections of brand, which we call the 8 Ps, an easy to understand and implement program so every business owner can amplify their brand. And this week, the Michelangelo moment that Sim is having is positioning. And it's a key thing for you if you find that you're in a position where your brand needs to reposition itself, which involves a rebranding, and we'll go through some of those steps. So what is a rebrand? Well, look, a rebrand can be a powerful tool that refreshes your image, connects with your target audience, and it makes you stay more relevant in a constantly evolving market. So a rebrand should not be taken lightly. It involves a thoughtful planning, research, and a deep understanding of brand's identity, target audience, and the market dynamic. So if you're considering a rebrand, look, consult with a branding expert to ensure that your process is well executed and aligns with your business goals. And we do know a couple of guys that would be very interested to have a chat with you if you're in that position. Let's have a chat about the topics we're going to cover today. We've got 12 of them. We're going to talk about outdated visual identity, whether there's a declining market share and sales in your business. Have you mismatched what you're trying to achieve with your target audience, which has led to number 4, which is potentially a negative brand perception. And are you trying to maybe expand your products or services? And so what you were doing previously isn't going to marry with that. Maybe you've got a merger and acquisition going on. There's a shift in a company values or mission. That's a critical one. And this is becoming more and more common. You may be going global or entering new markets because technology is evolving, or the market these days. You can be a small business sitting in your backyard and in your bedroom, and you can still be running a global business. You may have stagnant brand awareness. People may not be finding you or knowing of you, and maybe the way you were approaching it wasn't the right way, and you need to revisit that. A common one we come across is legal or trademark issues. So that's something else we're going to talk about, and loss of relevance. So are you still relevant? And there's reasons for that. And then finally, internal motivation. Maybe there is something going on inside your brand that is really, really eating away at you and your team, your your partners, whatever the case be, just aren't buying into where you're going. So you've got to look at how to revisit that. So they're the topics. I mean, the first one we're going to kick off with is outdated visual identity. So if your logo colors and overall brand design look old-fashioned and don't resonate with the modern consumer, it's time to consider a rebrand to appear more current and appealing. Nothing is more relevant than the fact that if you had a brand that maybe evolved in the 90s and the noughties, it wasn't worrying about little squares. And then all of a sudden mobiles kicked in and we had internet, social media kick in, and all of a sudden your logo has to work in a square.
Yes.
Really good example of that.
And by old-fashioned, we just want to refer that there's nothing wrong with the intentional old-fashioned or vintagey look. What we mean by this is that the technical assets, the brand was locked into a time in the past, or simply, like Chris just mentioned, it has not been optimized for the mobile reality we currently are going through. So this is one of the reasons why you may want to update your visual identity.
Yeah. So I think that was a pretty obvious one why you would want to go down that pathway. And we should move on to the next one, which is if you are finding that you've got a declining market share in sales. So if your business is experiencing a slump in sales, losing ground on competitors, a rebrand can help reposition your brand and regain market relevance. Now, this can be relevant to a small business or a large business. We've seen it with large businesses, how they do it. With a small business, it can be just simple things in revisiting the type of images you're using when you're doing your marketing and promotions. It could be just certain colors or the way you're using colors. We've had clients where it's just simply reversing the colors. So if they were using, in this case on the screen here, we've got pink, we reverse it out and put black in as more prominent. That could be a simple way of looking at the rebrand process of what you do. So there is scales of economy when it comes to rebranding, but it doesn't have to be just doing the logo. There could be other things that are going to help you improve the market share or the sales of your business. It's just looking at how your brand's perceived by everyone out there. Excuse me. So look, this is a common one. When we go through our P8 program, there are some people who have a vision for their business, but they don't really be honest with themselves and say, this is who they're really trying to talk to. So there could be a mismatch with the target audience. So if your brand no longer aligns with the preferences and values of your target audience, a rebrand can help you realign your image and messaging to better connect with them. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, Sim. Like if you don't understand your target audience, you can get branding pretty wrong.
Oh, yes, very much so. Examples of our favorite types of clients with coaches, for example, one of our clients was trying to attract an audience comprised of family dads. And then all of a sudden they realized the way I'm positioning myself, I'm actually not talking to those people. I'm actually more targeting C-suite types. C-suite types, very alpha geared personalities. They have scarcity of time. They're challenged for patience. They rotate their existence in between a home environment and a high stress environment. They need to perform, and therefore the marketing that is attracting that type of person is diametrically opposed to the ones that talk to stay-at-home dads, laid-back type of people, and that required a rebrand.
That's right. We've got a building client that we're working with at the moment that was targeting everyday families for his business with his current approach, but then he's wanted to approach a more luxury client, a more prestigious type client. So we've had to look at his branding to make sure that resonates with the audience that he's actually trying to attract, because the website and the current branding he has doesn't do that. And that's another example of why rebranding is relevant. For him, we didn't actually need to redo the logo. We've just had to look at all the other elements that build the brand story, so that he is becoming relevant to that target audience that he's trying to approach. This one's one that a lot of businesses have to deal with, but there are times when you have a negative brand perception. So if your brand is faced with a reputational issue, a negative public perception, a rebrand can serve as a fresh start and help you rebuild that trust with consumers. We've seen this happen many, many times with brands where they've, I guess, like even McDonald's, they went through a period where they were considered fat fast food, and they launched salads on their menu. So that was their version of trying to refresh their brand and trying to show that, look, that they don't just have to do burgers, they can do salads as well and bring that together. So that's just, again, another example of how you sort of take the perception of your brand and try and reposition it in a certain way. You can do this also, like we touched on earlier, with the way that you would do it with your visuals. You can do it with the way you position your business, where you show up with your brand. There's another very common thing that a lot of businesses do, especially banks and things like that, is they start sponsoring charity events or being shown up at charity events so that they look like they're really, really putting their money into good causes so that they look better in the way that they go about it. Whatever works for you. Right. The negative brand perception, that's, again, a process we can go through with our clients and actually work out what is the right step to overcome that negative perception that your brand is receiving. Anything on that, Sim?
Yes, please note, everybody, that this is a specific example where the rebrand doesn't actually reflect itself so much visually. It may have some adaptations. In the case of McDonald's, they started including the earth green in a number of their products. And now that I'm talking about it, Coca-Cola also went through an earth green period where they tried to launch a beverage that was earth green, which is contrary to everything that red that they've put out in their entire history. But going back to McDonald's, this required very little effort from the production side, more on the logistic and perception side. So by creating that new number of salads and products that they offered to their audience, they in some way affected the perception that they're a fat-only type of food chain.
Yeah. And that was brought about by the that documentary, which ended up has been now shown it was a myth. What was it? The guy who ate McDonald's for 30 days or something. But that
Super Size Me.
Super Size Me, and ended up that Super Size Me guy actually didn't do what he was saying he was doing in that perception. So, which is unfortunate, because it would have been good to have that be the reality. But as we know in life, not everything is reality. So. Perception of everything. Anyway, moving on. So maybe you're having a good time in business and things are expanding. So you've now got a new bunch of products you want to get out to the market, or services that you want to put out there because there's been something going on in your industry that allows you to offer something new or different. So if your business has expanded to new areas, offers a wider range of product or services, a rebrand can reflect this growth and avoid confusion amongst customers. So rather than just whacking out a whole bunch of products or services, you can maybe use that as an opportunity to rebrand yourself and make yourself look a certain way in the market. And so we've worked with a number of clients where they've tried to do this, and it's been successful for many of them. But it's, again, understanding your market, knowing when to do it, why to do it, and not just do it just because you've got a new product. Like, maybe that's not the right reason to do it. But if you have a suite of products, or it's a particular suite of products that touches all the, client journey pathways, then that's clearly a good sign that maybe a rebrand is the right approach, so that you can launch that new product and services with that new brand. But again,
and in fact, it should be should in fact be accompanied by the signal to the public, because if you just went through the process of logistically and production-wise, including the required means to offer that expanded range of products, you need to capitalize on that. You need to obviously make up for the investment required, and the public needs to know. They deserve to know that you have a better offer or a more extended offer in some capacity. And this is a prime candidate for a visual identity or a rebrand update.
That's right. Yeah. So if you're going through that pathway, another thing that happens now, this doesn't happen every day, but we have seen many mergers in corporate world over the years where a merger or an acquisition has happened, and after that merger and acquisition, a rebrand is necessary to integrate the two companies in a cohesive brand that represents the new entity. This is a little bit fraught with danger as well, because you can have a brand with a good perceived brand presence and one with a bad one, and then they come together because that business was going so badly, the good business bought it, but that means you're dragging some of their negative press to you, and you've got to work hard to rework that. So you've got to be careful how you go about this one, but there is definitely times when I've seen a merging of brands. The one that doesn't work so well is when it looks too much like you've just got the left side and the right side, and you just kind of mash it together and try and create a new logo with that. That doesn't work. Sometimes it is best to do a full rebrand and just start with a whole new entity with new colors, new look and feel, new everything, and just build on that history. And hopefully you get it right, and the people who have already been buying with you for years still want to keep buying with you or get excited about the new direction you're taking your business. This is probably the one thing that you need to understand when you're talking about mergers and acquisitions. For small business may not be as relevant for you, but still there are times when you are bought out or you are looking at acquiring someone else, and you need to think about these things when it comes to rebranding.
Yep.
Another thing is shifting in company values or missions. So if your business has undergone a significant change in values, purpose, or missions, a rebrand can be a way to communicate these up-to-dates to your customers and stakeholders. So again, we don't just wake up every morning and think we're going to go a different direction today. This is something that's built up over time, and pressure's got to a certain point, and you've said, it's now time. We've now got to look at the different direction because of that technology's come into our world, and we've got to change the direction we're going, or we've had this much feedback from our clients that this is where we've got to go. Like, this is the direction we have to take. So there's all sorts of reasons why you want to go this way. But, you know, once your mission changes, you really need to think about, is the brand still communicating what we were trying to say when we started the business, and revisit that. Anything on this one, Sim?
Well, I think I'll pair this one with the next slide over, which is, if you want to rotate over to that one, which is the globalization and entering new markets. When your brand is expanding international, potentially globally, and targeting new geographic markets or demographics, a rebrand is meant to achieve the adaptation and accepting of this identity to the local cultures it will be marketed to. With this comes the preferences. And the unfamous or famous, depending on who listens and what their views on the topic are, Pfizer is a prime example of how the globalization, entering new markets, can reflect an adaptation in visual identity. Back in 2021, right at the start of the last big major episode that our planet went through, they decided to rebrand. And with that rebrand, they created a new identity, represented their logo with a clear association to DNA strands, which is very evident by the products and launches that they've since put out.
Yeah, so I mean that's the example of look, entering new markets. We touched on this in a previous episode about AI has come into the world. So if you are looking to expand into the world of AI at the moment, this is potentially a perfect opportunity for you to look at your current brand and saying, is it modern enough? Is it showing off enough relevancy to AI? Those kind of things, because we're clearly understanding now that AI is not a flash in the pan thing. It's something that's going to be with us forever now. It's like social media when it came out. We thought it was just a gimmick, and now it's still here 20 odd years ago. So you've just got to consider, where does this fit into your next 5 years, 10 years, those kind of things, because that's where globalization or entering new markets, it's a tricky thing, but you've got to look at how you enter that market.
And especially if your point of differentiation relies on the new technology that is available for you to show and message your audience that you're now much more capable of handling volume or treating data in large amounts, or in some way are processing you've increased your processing capability by including AI features in it. So that's also something to consider. Yeah. And if you haven't, which probably most of us are still trying to find our feet in this AI sudden wave, it is the time to look at, should our identity, should our brand reflect that we are intentionally including processes that include AI and build into the delivery of our services.
Yeah, and the globalization one there too. Like if you've been in the Australian market that we're in right now, and you now look to go global, if you had a koala on it, is that koala still relevant to the market you're going into? Is that going to benefit you? Is it not going to benefit you? Should the koala that you've got in a certain style be more relevant to, say, if it was going into an Asian market or it was going into an American market? Do you re-look at how that is being perceived in those markets? So these are things to consider when you think about going global, because it is a global market we have today. You can work from your bedroom and have a global business, but we're just saying that the way it's perceived needs to be hitting the mark. So you need to think about how that global market is going to take that on. Now, this is something that happens to a lot of brands, is that they've been around for a while and things have got a bit stagnant. The brand awareness isn't quite getting the growth that it had when it started. The buzz isn't there anymore. So it isn't top of the mind of the consumer. It struggles to get recognition, and the rebrand can help increase that visibility and recall, because we've touched on this before. Sometimes by creating something new creates the opportunity for you to be different, and then that leads to people going, well, I've been doing that brand, but this looks new and interesting, maybe I'll give that a go. And if the experience is a good one, then they're maybe going to switch from whatever brand they were happy with previously to yours, because yours now is new, different, and gone there. And even though it may be the same product you're offering, it looks different, it feels different, it's you're saying it differently. It just has a new feel, and that may be all that is required for somebody to, even though it's the same thing, switch, just because it's being communicated differently, either both visually and audio, and the way that it's seen in the certain places that you're putting your brand. These are things to consider. So any thoughts on that one?
Yes, I want to put out the, the warning or the disclaimer sign with this particular one is to listen to your relevant audience and not chase trends. The difference here being that a trend is something that will probably encompass a larger slice of the entire market rather than your valued customers who have been with you. And instead of being stimulated by it, you just gained a new surge of traction with somebody that was never your client, that they may not have a value alignment or a history of purchasing your product or your offering. And instead of just chasing a trend, make sure it's a relevant reason for that rebrand. Now, you can do this in a number of ways, but it is always going to pass by listening to your audience, listening to your customers, and see the reactions from the people who have been in your demographic up to this date, and evaluate the pros and cons of doing something temporarily for a campaign-based alteration or sudden look, or what is going to be relevant in the future, in the coming predictable future, for your brand's messaging and positioning.
Yeah, that's right. So this is a common one that we have come across a fair bit, and I've seen some horror stories when it comes to this one. So, and the reason this happens a lot is a lot of people will go to their graphic designer and say, I like that brand, can you make mine look like that? And they've got a great tagline. Can I grab their tagline and just put it in my business, right? So legal or trademark issues are a real thing. So if your current brand infringes on an existing trademark or a legal issue arises, a rebrand is a strategic solution. Now, there's all sorts of scales on this one, and it depends on the size of your business and how long you've been in business and how much money, deep pockets you've got. Last time we went to this topic, I was talking about Kate Perry, a local brand here, that a woman who owns a boutique clothing store is fighting Kate Perry, the singer, and she actually won the first round. But the problem is Kate Perry, the singer, has deeper pockets and more to lose from not having this IP in her name. So she's gone back into the trenches of war, and we're back in doing legal cases on this. So, sometimes you just got to choose when the fight's the fight for you to win and lose. Now, with this poor woman, her name is Kate Perry, so it's very, very difficult for her to give it up, because it's her name. But there are times when, and we get this a lot from clients where they say, can you make us look a little bit more Apple-y? Like, let's do what Apple does, And we actually had an example of this recently where a client wanted to launch a brand based on a movie character. Remember that recently we had this?
Yes. Yeah.
And the concept was amazing.
Basically,
we would have loved to work on the project because it was a really cool concept. But we had to say to the client, please go talk to your lawyers and just get this signed off as the right thing to do, because what we don't want to do is waste, in this case, it was going to be tens of thousands of dollars for this client to implement, not just the design and logo and branding stuff, but once we gave it to him, he then had to put it on all the material that he had to do to put this idea out there. Now, if he'd done that, and then even if it was 2 years from now and he's had some revenue, but that means that that's revenue that IP could attack or go for, because he's now built up a slush fund for them to have a go at. So it's not always the fact that, you're successful and you're making it happen. It's the fact that could actually be the ultimate downfall of you, is you've got too much money now that they now want to attack you because they know they can get it all back from you because you've infringed their IP.
Preach. So that's exactly, Chris. Yep.
Yeah.
So the problem with local small businesses doing isolated, I won't get caught kind of branding approaches is exactly this. If somewhere down the line, this brand is in fact caught and called out, and it proves to have a track record of profit made from a brand identity that, or a brand in some capacity, or a trademark issue is spotted that generated profit from it, then the problem is not just changing the logo on the day. It's actually going to be what's the expression? Restituting damage by profits acquired during that process that the trademark allowed the infringing part to profit from. So exactly. This is where it gets very tricky, and we highly advise that you do a little research into copywriting and trademarking, both locally, nationally, internationally, and globally. There are several layers of interpretation, and we don't want to get too technical today, but do have a word with us. We have copyright and trademark lawyers in our Rolodex, and we'd be happy to quickly have a call with them if this is something that you may be thinking of. Horror cases happen every day. And let's not just stick to logos. This happens with photographs as well. People just nab photos that are available on Google, and they're not public domain. They're seen in public, but they're not simply available for the taking. And copyright issues are ripe in, for example, stock photography providers. They have digital ways of tracking down what photos were used without payment, without release of a copyright. And all of these things incur in the several thousands of dollars of law costs, fees, and issues. So keep in mind that just because it's online, it's not available for you to simply grab. I see this happen all the time with photographs, Teams logos, especially for let's say local plumbers that simply grab an NBA, an NFL logo and change one eye of the entire illustration and call it their business. I literally have taken photos of very blatant ripoffs. So be mindful of this, small business owners. And if you have any questions, let us know.
Because it's a costly affair. I've seen so many times clients have gone down the pathway of having like their vehicles, billboards, and the funny thing was, in this particular case I'm talking about, it was the billboard that made them come undone, because the competitor or the person that owned the IP saw the billboard and was able to then say, well, hang on, that's my IP, and attack them, right? So they spent a lot of money, and we all know billboards aren't cheap. So, and the billboards had on it, all the cars, all the people in the signage, they had the hats, the merchandise. They'd spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on this, and that one at billboard got them caught out, and down they went. So the legal pathway, and they had to basically they had nothing to stand on because that brand had been around longer than them, and there's a certain rule around that, but we won't get into the legals of that today. That's not what today's all about. But let's talk about loss of relevance. So if your brand feels disconnected from the current trends and tastes of your industry or target audience, a rebrand can revitalize your image and regain relevance. So this is probably more common these days than it was in a lot of years, because previously, without the internet and without social media, your brand could kind of just fester along and do its thing. But with the internet these days, this becomes even more like, it's just sped up the process. If you're not being seen the right way, or you are being seen but the wrong way, people can just instantly go, it's not for me. That's not right. I don't like the way they do things, and move on quite quickly. Where previously it might have been just word of mouth that has taken time for that to evolve and get to where it needs to go. But with the internet, one post, a post in a group where there's thousands or hundreds of thousands of people in it, can just instantly ruin your brand and lose relevance, just because of you just not keeping up with the time. So make sure that you look at the way your brand is being perceived, and is it current. And when we talk about trends, we're not talking about jumping on the bandwagon and just going with it, but just making sure, is this a long-term trend? And we touched on AI earlier, that if you are a certain brand that is doing things a certain way and you're like, we're not going to go near AI because of X, Y, Z, whatever those reasons are, and your competitors are, and they're maybe not being super successful at it, but they look like they're having a go and they're looking like they're sticking with the times, then that could be damaging to your brand. So just be mindful of those things, and making sure you're keeping your finger on the pulse with what your competitors are doing or your industry is doing as a whole. Yes, Sim.
With this particular point, you need to be aware that this is kind of a double-edged sword. The first point that Chris talked about is the acceleration of our perception. This works in both positive and negative. Just like small businesses can be made much more agile and flexible by testing new things and quickly get very good evaluation tips and samples from the market in terms of response, they can also get worn down very, very quickly because of all this process of multiple exposure that we now have. Simply by walking outside, we're exposed to hundreds of things, and those things wear you down or build you up in some way, form, or capacity. So keep in mind that the acceleration is not the issue, is whether you're pointed in the right direction, which you're now magnifying, or going down the wrong path, which is further burying you in a place that you won't be able to get out of.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So look at things that are going on in your industry, your world, your local backyard, whatever it is. Just make sure that you're not losing business because you're not keeping up to either, as I said, trends or tastes in your industry or target audience. It's really important to make sure you're still relevant. Final thing we want to talk about before we get into some examples is internal motivation and morale. So sometimes a rebrand can be an internal initiative to boost employee morale, create excitement with the company about the brand's future. Like Google are a great example of this one. Like they have their external culture that we all see. And then we've all heard, because it just gets out through the grapevine, of what the culture is inside Google. And the world they have in that environment. We've all seen the offices and what they get to do. And so, Google has become a place that's not for nerds and a fun, it's supposed to be a fun place to work, even though the data and everything they're doing seems a bit mundane. But some of the things they're doing and the way they go about it, internal culture is built by the fact that they have a good way of keeping the internal motivation and morale high, and off they go. Apple, we've heard the opposite. Like when Steve Jobs was doing his thing, it wasn't really about morale. It was about motivation.
It was about working under constant stress and fear of being canned the next day or the next meeting.
So, he had a great motivating approach, but not maybe the morale approach. So, but look, again,
not sustaining.
Yeah. So branding doesn't always have to be an external thing. You might have an approach you need to take for internal rebranding so that you can build the morale inside your team or inside the culture of the community that you work in, or whatever the case be. So just consider these things when it comes to your rebranding approach. It may not have to be an external one. It may have to be something you do for an internal approach to making sure that internally everyone gets to see what you're trying to achieve. And then hopefully by that internal change, it leads to the external change, because they're now either clearer on what they're doing and why they're doing it, and then they know how to approach the externals because their internals are so clear. Okay, so just be mindful of getting this right is something that's really important to the future. So anything on that before I move on, Tim?
I think you touched through other words the importance of culture in the company and how that affects the humans that that are building from within, and then how that trickles out. So enough said.
Cool. Let's get into some examples. So we're going to just skim over these, but just give you a bit of a sort of overview on each one of them, because many of these brands we've got on the screen here have done this quite well over the years, and none more than this next one that neither of us use, but we love what they did, right? So
Yes.
the logo is on the screen. It's actually not what changed and made the big splash. What changed for them was, when we talk about branding, we touched on this many times, is it's not about just your visual identity. It's about how you get others to perceive your brand and talk to others and go from that. And so when in the, is it the noughties now this happened? I'm trying to think whether it was 90s or noughties.
It was late 90s.
Yeah, it was the noughties. In the 2004 period there, maybe with that logo there that's been changed. I think that could be when it started to happen. But like you and I touched on this in the last episode, that it was something my grandfather used. It was something my father used. And it was just this white bottle with a little blue thing on the front. And I smelt it, just sort of old men. And then they created this really, really cool logo. Sorry, not logo, ad where Old Man Spice turned into a very, very cool dude that did some really cool things visually on the screen. And all of a sudden, it became relevant, it became cool, it became something you wanted to talk about, and that led to wearing it. And they had a massive spike in sales and change in how the brand was perceived. So it's, to me, the ultimate, in recent times, example of an old brand that was really, really dated becoming super relevant and becoming, cool again. And they found a way to do it. And that's the one example I think of rebranding being done well. Apple is more of a traditional approach to how rebranding has worked. So on the screen, if you do see this, you will see that and you can look at this online, you just have to type in Apple rebranding or logo evolution. But Apple's initial logo featured a detailed illustration of Sir Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree. This was back in 1977, when they then switched across to the iconic rainbow Apple logo, which then in 1998, they even simplified it further by making it monochromatic and minimalistic Apple that we know today. So this rebranding aligned with their shift towards being more modern, streamlined image, which helped propel them to become one of the world's most valuable companies today. As we said, in reverse of what we just said before, that the logo is the only thing that matters, but this is one thing that they put on all their products, on everything they touch, and this evolution of that logo has reflected the brand that they have built.
And it's very interesting to make a breakdown of their success throughout the ages. Notice that between 76 and 77, they must have realized they hit the sweet spot. That sweet spot was actually maintaining and condensing the message. Sir Isaac Newton under a tree and the apple. That turned into the Apple. The funny thing is, if that 1977 Apple was put out today, it would have a completely different connotation with the LGBTQ community raving its values. But that was not the case at all at that time. What they wanted to go for with that logo was the fact that the computer itself brought a new system of colors that was a complete disruption of the market of the traditional black and white or the monochromatic screens up until that point. And 1998 simplified that formula. 2001 added that glossy, mirrory look. 2007 was a further step in that direction. And again, we cyclically revisit the trends throughout time. We're simplifying. We're seeing the simplification of the logo again, and what it stands for today is nothing radically different than what it was in '76. However, the execution is optimized for everything that we have today. So that logo today, simplified on a screen, mobile, and put on a facade, reads very well, very simply, and very direct. If you try to reproduce the 1976 logo of that Apple had today in a facade, that would entail a huge spend in terms of production, and it would probably simply get lost in the mobile platforms that we so love to use nowadays.
Yes, no, well said. So another one that's gone through this similar journey is Nike. Originally known as Blue Ribbon Sports, Nike underwent a rebrand in 1971, adopting the name Nike after the Greek goddess of victory. So the iconic swoosh was also introduced during this time, and the rebrand emphasized their focus on performance and innovation, helping them become one of the leading sportswear brands today. So that evolution of the logo that you can see there has gone with the times, but obviously we've talked about this. Not everyone's going to have a budget of millions and billions to bring the identity of your icon, your logo, to the point where you don't even need to have the name anymore, and it's just a swoosh. Okay, so not everyone's going to be
actually
this, but it does highlight.
Yeah, that's a brand luxury.
It is, but what it does highlight is the evolution of it and how they've adapted to that. But what was also clear about Nike was that they didn't just change their logo, they changed their philosophy in how they went about things. And before even, and I don't know whether anyone has seen the Air movie, which is all about the Air Jordan period. But in that movie, they do highlight on this inside the brand that they even joke about it in the movie. They go, "But we're a running shoe brand, like
Correct.
we don't do basketball," So so at that point, they knew who they were, but they were bold enough to try this new direction and broaden from just being running to athletes. And I don't think they've ever looked back, to be honest. So
they had that moment of critical rewriting of the future, going from a Portland-based, very entrenched running community, which is comprised of individuals with very specific personality traits, and going into the basketball courts, which they were so far behind, they weren't even coming up as options for the other famous brands at the time that athletes would like to.
Yeah, but they were the fourth known brand or the seventh known brand. I can't remember. They were very, like, they weren't in the top three.
Yes.
Of brands.
Yeah, and that's how far they were from being considered for an option.
Yeah, and like even in the movie, and Michael Jordan's been noted to say this, that when his mother came to him and said, "Oh, Nike have come to you wanting to do a shoe," he's like, "No, I want to be an." Was it Adidas or
Adidas? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he was like, "I can only do Adidas because that's the only place people go to be successful. Like they're the ultimate thing." So like it was a brand back then that had that thing. It's just as I said, this is the perception of your branding and rebranding, how getting it right can change your future of your business, not maybe overnight, but it builds the next step and the foundations for the next success, wherever that direction is. So, like Nike is the ultimate example of showing you that a brand had a purpose, it had a direction, it could have kept going down that narrow margin. There are many running shoes out there that are that. Even today, they don't do athletes, they do just running. But Nike was one that was just one of those things that was able to take on Air Jordan, and Air Jordan became what it was. And now they do basically anything athletic, change the whole direction of the business. So think about how that might work for your business, whatever stage of your brand you are at. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the McDonald's one, but it's clearly McDonald's have had an evolution of their logo. And we talked about this earlier with the fact that they have had internally changes by introducing salads to their menu and all sorts of other stuff. So they've had to look at their business as the trending in the consumer has changed, and they've worked with it as well. And I think they also, based on even looking at the logo, you can see they have gone through the evolution of the square and what that means to their business when it comes to social media marketing. Starbucks is an interesting one. Do you want to talk through this one, Sim?
Yes, the the way they started out by having that inclusion of the mermaid and how it evolved over the years there, they dropped the word coffee from their earlier versions of logo and brought that mermaid more to the forefront. The streamlined, more refined design represented Starbucks' broader focus on beverages beyond just coffee, which, by the way, is nothing special for those of us who really do like good coffee. That we are generally aware that American coffee is not fantastic, but the franchise explored the massification of coffee and bringing in of customers through the doors for other things other than just coffee. So they have that expression through their logo mark today. They bring in people, and you come in for something that maybe coffee started with coffee some time ago, but now can go into cakes. You sit in and you pull your laptop out, and they just were able to build a culture of come in and stay for a while, coffee culture. So they became so widely known and simplified their logo to reflect that evolution throughout time.
And the thing is, they're now known as Starbucks, not Starbucks coffee, because they're not about coffee anymore. Yeah. Okay. So that's the relevancy there. Touching on Microsoft, won't go too much into this one, but in 2012 they launched a complete overhaul of their visual identity because it changed the logo for the first time in really 25 years. The new logo represented a multicolored square, represented the company's diverse products and ranges. The rebrand signified a shift towards more unified and innovative image. Now, to be honest, it's a very simple font. It's a very simple logo, 4 squares, but it's where Windows came from, so it's aligned with its heritage. And you can even look at the original 1975 and 81 logos. They are very much the time. I look at those and I go, I've seen many a movie that had that logo font going on in its title and the thing. So it'll be interesting to look at Microsoft in the next 50 years, whether this, which is a much more timeless logo, whether it's going to be able to do its thing. So the final one, I think there's a couple more, but this one is Uber. They, to be honest, we're talking about a company that has been only around for what, 12, 13 years. And in that time,
so incredibly young still.
Yeah, but because of the nature of its business, it's just evolving. They've had to evolve with the times, and you can see these subtle changes of their logos as they have evolved from the U. And strangely enough, they've gone from symbolism back to words.
Yes,
in the way that they're thinking about it. But again, they're quite aware that they have to keep Uber inside the logo of the square in the way that they've done it. So, the Uber cabs and UC, so the C is clearly been taken off the logo. I was actually a fan of the one that they were working on within the 2016 to 17 phase, but clearly they needed to be more brand aware because people weren't identifying with what the little square and circle were, even though the Uber brand is known globally. It maybe wasn't getting the recognition that they needed. The big one that I'm going to finish on here is Coca-Cola as a brand. Now, we all know Coca-Cola in its way, but we touched on this in the last episode of this when we were talking about evolving or looking at rebrand and reasons to do it. What Coca-Cola have been amazing at over the years is the fact that we always think that Coca-Cola is new and different because they're always changing our perception of the brand in the way that they market and advertise the product. It's the same product. It's been very much the same product for, not, I can't say for 100 years, because I know that there was all those, mythical stories about cocaine and all sorts of stuff being put into this product back in its early days. But what we're saying is that it's pretty much since the early 50s, 60s, it's been very, very much the same product. But what's interesting is that they have evolved this logo into what it is now, where it's wrapped around the bottle, even though they have cans and all sorts of other things, but they've gone with this as the new identity because, and it's a bit of an anomaly actually, to be honest, because it goes against all the squares and the readability on logo, all that stuff. But because of the brand's recognition, we know what it is. We know what it.
Yes.
What when you see it, you just instantly think Coca-Cola, whether it's got red, black, or white, whatever. You just know as soon as you start seeing that swirly logo that it must be Coca-Cola. So, an interesting one that's an anomaly in the world of branding. So, look, that brings us to the coffee cup moment where we want to remember that a rebrand should not be taken lightly. It involves a thoughtful planning, research, and deep understanding of your brand's identity, your target audience, and the market dynamics. So we strongly recommend, if you're considering a rebrand, consult with branding experts to ensure the process is well executed and aligns with your business goals. And hopefully the 12 or so examples we've just walked you through and the examples of brands that have done successfully gives you the motivation to talk to us and have a chat about how your brand could be rebranded in the coming period and where that's going to take you. And being the start of the year, I think it's a great time to explore that. So if you want to reach out to us right now, we would love to hear from you. What would that mean? It would mean booking in a discovery session so we can better understand your business, your assets, the state of your brand and your goals, and where your brand really needs to be. So we'd love you to visit our website and book yourself in for a brand guardianship session, discovery session. How does that work? Well, if you do the brand guardianship it's really as simple as 1, 2, 3, do that discovery call. We then select a program that works for you. Together we determine what program meets your goals and put them in place, which means then we work with you onboarding and coaching you and mentoring you, which is what we call brand guardianship, to stay focused and help you amplify your brand. If this is something that's really, really excited about or want to explore, please reach out to us, book that discovery session, and we would love to hear from you and just see where we fit into your brand's rebranding exercise in the near future. Before I go to thank you, anything you want to sign off with, Sim?
Yes, if you are a business owner and small business owner, which is more likely to be the person listening to this right now, if you are in the process of thinking about a rebrand, don't isolate yourself in a silo and make the decision, because perspective is your best ally in this process. Whether you talk to us, to other brand experts, or to a copy trademark lawyer, we recommend that you get an impartial look at your brand. Don't just talk to your family and friends, because they have a very conditioned perspective of what your brand is or has been up until now. And when we mentioned at the start that this could be a rebirth tool or a suicide tool, we've given you enough examples to evaluate that spectrum. And the people closer to the brand are sometimes the furthest away from reality. We don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the nature of us as humans, because we develop relationships and sometimes emotions get in the way of facts. So if you are in the process of rebranding, have a quick look, have a quick chat, and the investment will definitely pay off, because in the long run, you may avoid problems of the types that we've mentioned today. So with that, we're going to close. Thank you for your attention today. And we look forward to amplifying your brand. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. And if you do want to make comments or give us feedback on today's session, please make the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Take care, everyone. Thank you.